Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Bellomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law. And, well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. And today is going to fall squarely under the estate planning and elder law category. So I'm really excited about the show today. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are as well. Before we get into the show today, I want to just give a couple quick announcements. First of all, we have moved in Lancaster. So if you are looking for us in the Lancaster office, we are no longer at the Regency Suite on Embassy Drive. We are now at 1755 Oregon Pike. So for those of you in Lancaster, we are basically right behind the Eden Resort and the Sheets in that complex there, right behind it, the office complex. So we are very excited. We are on the first floor, handicap accessible, same as the York office as well. So we are able to serve in York and Lancaster in our brand new space in Lancaster. So we are really, really, really excited about that. We have now been doing the radio show for quite a while, and we've been getting a lot of wonderful feedback, wonderful questions and things. So now a lot of the podcasts are going to start being about the questions that we are getting. And so one of the big questions that we are getting is we do our radio show on the radio. We also do our podcast on video. So for the people listening on the radio show, you are actually just hearing it, whereas the people who are watching the podcast are seeing it as well. And the podcast people who are also listening on the radio are confused a little bit. So I just wanted to clear up some of the confusion more on the podcast side than on the radio side. On the podcast side, we do record these videos, and then we have to edit them and do a lot of work to them to get them ready to be able to publish. And so that does take a little bit of time, and we also record them fairly often, especially when we're trying to coordinate our guest schedule so that we have guests coming on as well, and we want to make sure that the guests are able to do it and that they have time blocked in their schedule. So for the people seeing it in person or live, what you're seeing is some of these videos that are coming out from several months ago. And the reason that that is becoming a question is because we're also doing tips of the day and videos that are coming out in real time and pictures that are coming out in real time, and people are confused. Yes, I did lose about 100 pounds. I have been religiously watching my diet and working out, and it's been pretty serious here about the last 7 months. And I have lost just shy of 100 pounds. I'm feeling wonderful, and it's really working out well, and I feel amazing. But what the confusion is that when you're seeing some of these podcasts and you're actually seeing the video, you're seeing that certainly I have lost significant amount of weight. I have never felt better. I am in wonderful shape, feeling wonderful now. So I just wanted everyone to know I am doing wonderful and everything is okay. In fact, never better. So just taking care of me and making sure that I'm going to be here for a long time to serve our clients and also be with my team as long as I possibly can. So everything is good. Thank you for noticing, but no reason to get nervous if you see a podcast where I look a little heavier. Those are just ones that are being put out after the editing is done, and we're able to get them in the production schedule. We don't want to drop too many podcasts at one time. So everything is A-okay. And please check us out in the Lancaster office. We do workshops on a weekly basis, both in York and Lancaster. So our York office, of course, is at 3198 East Market Street. And in Lancaster, we are now at 1755 Oregon Pike, right behind the Eden Resort and the Sheets there in that office complex. The workshops that we are having are on estate planning, Medicaid crisis planning. We have special needs workshops. We have probate administration workshops, trust administration workshops on a very regular basis. In fact, pretty much weekly, we are doing the estate planning workshops in both York and Lancaster. And about every other week, we are doing the Medicaid crisis workshop. We have all of our workshops on a link as well that we could send you to watch in the comfort of your home. And then we will certainly follow up with you after that to see what makes the most sense in moving forward. If you're looking for education, we would love to be your source for that information. And certainly, hopefully, you can check out our website as well, as we have a lot of podcasts, blogs, both written, audio, and everything that you can listen, watch, read, whatever is the best form for you. So, excellent. All right, now into today's show. We have been getting a lot of emails, a lot of questions, and from the guy who is producing the videos. It's tough, right? Because I'm doing weekly workshops. I'm also doing a lot of community presentations in the community, getting out there, trying to educate. And then, of course, these podcasts are also another way of community education. And those of you who have been listening to me for a while, you know that I think gift, G-I-F-T, is a 4-letter word, right? And for years, I've always been saying that word and then shaking and convulsing and explaining the difference between the tax rules versus the long-term care rules versus the estate planning rules. In fact, I'd say for at least 5 years, we were doing a 3 lands workshop where I would be running around the room from left to right, talking about the different scenarios. In fact, sometimes I still bring it in depending on the questions that we get, because it's a nice visual to show. So when we started getting a lot of these questions, and it was the same question, it's tough because on one hand, it's great. I love that I'm getting questions. I love that people are engaging in the podcast and that they're getting a lot of traction. But I'm like, man, clearly the point I'm trying to make is not getting through. So I definitely want to address the question. The question that we've been getting a lot lately is, I want to give my house to my grandchild, but I'm afraid that my inheritance will be squandered. And I actually sent a few emails back to some of the people asking, and specifically asked, why do you want to put it in your grandchild's name? And the answer is to avoid inheritance tax. So this brings us back to, some of the earlier podcasts that we kind of talked about it briefly, but I definitely want to spend a lot of time today because we've been getting it from several people. And I also think we need to expand the question just a little bit, because I don't think that it matters whether it's a grandchild or a child or anyone for that matter. I think the question is, if we're going to be giving or putting kids' names or grandchildren's names on assets to avoid inheritance tax, is that a good idea? And is there a better way to do it? And absolutely the answer is no. Right? I do not think that's a good idea. I think it's a horrible idea, in fact. So let's first start with inheritance tax. Pennsylvania taxes from the first dollar. So if you pass away as a decedent or a resident of the state of Pennsylvania, and you are a decedent in the state of Pennsylvania as a resident, then Pennsylvania gets to tax the inheritance tax, which is on the transfer of wealth. And I have said it numerous times. That is nothing more than a nuisance tax. Honestly, it's like that pimple on your back, right? It's annoying. It gets itchy. Maybe it even hurts. But at the end of the day, it's a very, very small tax and really should not be avoided. So hear me out. Let me just explain it before you think I'm crazy. Maybe I am, but for far different reasons. Okay. Now, inheritance tax. The rate that Pennsylvania taxes is based upon the relationship of the person receiving the wealth, right? It's a transfer tax. It's an inheritance tax on the transfer of the wealth. And the amount is dependent on the relationship. So if it is a spouse, it is a 0 rate, 0. If it is a lineal descendant, children, grandchildren, parent, grandparent, that amount is going to be 4.5%. Right? So straight up and straight down. 12% to siblings, 15% to anyone else in the world, including those lovely nieces and nephews and non-married partners. Okay? So what we're looking at here is essentially a transfer tax on the wealth, but it's a very low rate, right? So for a lot of people, you may have a spouse and it may be a 0 rate. You may have children and it's a 4.5% rate. Essentially, the only way to avoid inheritance tax is to not control the asset at the time of your death. Well, the biggest way to do that is to put it in the kid or grandchild's name. And that's the thing that I've been saying for years. Stop doing it. You give up control. You give up all kinds of stuff, right? So if you put your kid's name or grandchild, I'll address the question that was asked. If you put the grandchild's name on the house, who owns it? The grandchild. Subject to whose divorce, whose nursing home, whose car accident, whose stupidity? The grandchild, right? So all of those things would affect the ability of the person who used to own it, the grandparent, to live there. They could absolutely be evicted by the grandchild. If the grandchild dies first and it ends up going to the grandparent back, they have to pay inheritance tax on that at 4.5%. But what if the grandchild actually leaves the house to their spouse, which is probably likely? Now what happens, right? That grandparent is relying on the grandchild's spouse when the grandchild passes away to allow them to continue to live there and not to remove them and not to charge them and not to hurt them in any way. And if there's a car accident, if there's a stroke and the grandchild goes into the nursing home, those assets are countable resources for the grandchild. And don't forget, there is a 5-year look-back period on transfers. So if the grandparent transferred the asset to the grandchild within the 5-year look-back period, and the grandparent also needed long-term care, now we have a major issue because potentially the grandchild already had that as a countable resource, and now we have the grandparent because it's going to show up in the 5-year look-back period, which can be devastating, especially if it's a grandchild, because remember, in the state of Pennsylvania, there is a familial responsibility statute that says that children are responsible for the nursing home debt of the parent. And yes, we have done shows on this. Yes, we have done other podcasts on it. So please check those out, which means that the children are equally liable for the nursing home debt of the parent if the parent has an issue, can't pay the bill, and can't qualify for Medicaid. Well, if you transferred an asset within the 5-year look back and the grandchild has an issue and the grandparent has an issue and ends up needing long-term care, we could have a whammy of a problem. And the worst part, the nursing home's going after the children, not even the grandchild who received the gift. So please, 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 please stop doing that, right? The inheritance tax is a very, very small nuisance. Let me explain. Okay, so if we transfer an asset to a grandchild to avoid inheritance tax, at best, or to a child, whomever, at best, if it's a lineal descendant, we are avoiding a 4.5% tax. Okay, so let's just use an example, right? This happens all the time. Parent buys a house in the early 70s. Let's say it's, they paid $20,000 for it, and now the house is worth $200,000. If they put the grandchild's name or child's name on the house, the basis or the amount of the value that the grandchild has in that property is the same that the grandparent had at the time that they purchased it. So in our example, that could be $20,000. All right, now we are in the year, 2023? That house, let's just say it's worth $200,000. I'm just going to use a conservative low number on the value of that house. So that means that if the grandparent puts the grandchild's name on it, and let's just say, woo, right? We made it. They didn't end up divorce, nursing home, car accident. The grandparent didn't end up needing long-term care. And everything went exactly as we expected. And the grandchild had the property in their name for more than 1 year before death. That means that we avoided the 4.5% inheritance tax. But what it also means is that when that grandchild goes to sell that house, now we got a problem, right? Because the basis that the grandchild has in the property is potentially $20,000. Or it is $20,000. I shouldn't say potentially. It is. It's the low basis. It could even be less, right? Because if there was depreciation and things. But I don't want to get into any of that. Let's just say it was 20. That means that now when the grandchild sells that house for $200,000, there is $180,000 subject to capital gains tax. And that's depending on the income of the grandchild and it goes up to 23.8% on that $180,000. Well, think about it, right? Would you rather pay 4.5 on 200 or 23.8 on 180? We all know the answer. In fact, what are the two biggest assets that most people put their children and grandchildren's names on? Property and investments. What are the two biggest assets that appreciate in value? Property and investments, right? The two worst things to do that with, because it's causing a massive tax consequence to the grandchild. Now, if the person receiving it lives in it 2 out of 5 years as their primary residence, then they can avoid that capital gains tax. But I can tell you from experience, most children and grandchildren don't end up living in the parent or the grandparent's house because they have their own house. They have their own family. The grandparent wants to just keep it in the family, and potentially, really, they're focused on that inheritance tax and maybe the long-term care situation. So they're doing it not because the grandchild lives in it, but mostly because they want to avoid the inheritance tax and potentially avoid the long-term care situation, which there is a far better way to do it, right? Far, far better way. And I've been talking about it on these radio show over and over. It is a trust that allows the grantor to still be in control, still have it included in their individual income tax rates and tax returns, and allows it to be included in the estate at the time of their death. Now, here's where the magic happens. Because it's included in their estate at the time of death, the person receives a step up in basis. So, grandchild, right? Yes, they're going to pay 4.5% inheritance tax, but now the basis to them is $200,000, which means when they sell it for $200, what is 200 minus 200? That is zero. That is zero in capital gains tax. So yes, they're paying the 4.5, but they are avoiding the capital gains tax. And look, I can tell you that that is just a very small price. You much, in almost 100% of the cases are going to want the step up because you're going to want them to not have to pay capital gains tax. There is a high likelihood that a grandchild is going to sell a house or investments that the grandparent or parent had, because it doesn't mean the same to them. They don't have the same sentimental value that the parent or grandparent had. So they're going to be quick to sell, which means they're going to get nailed with the capital gains tax, which we really want to try to avoid. So that's where people start to think, I'll just put it in the kid or grandchild's name because I want to avoid the inheritance tax. No, you do not want to do that. And look, there's another better way to do it than just putting their name on it. Put it in a trust that the grantor or the person who creates it controls, meaning the grandparent. Now they're in control, but yet it still is protected from the long-term care situation, which is really what most people are worried about. Yes, there absolutely is included in the estate of the person who passes away, which is exactly what we want. It's exactly what we want because we want that step up, okay? So we have done tons of shows about this. Please check those shows out. Check our podcast out. We are on every place where you can see podcasts. You can go to our website. We have them everywhere, and we do a lot of podcasts on this. And please come to our weekly workshops because we talk about it every single week in our workshops about the better option. So to the listener who's asking, I want to give my house to my grandchild, but I'm worried that they're going to squander their inheritance. The truth is, they may do it intentionally or unintentionally, but it probably will happen. And that there is a much better way to do it. And it is what we talk about every week in our workshops. So please come check out our weekly workshops in York and Lancaster, or give the office a call and we can get you the link. There's a better way to do it. As I have been preaching for about the last 20 some years, is a gift is a 4-letter word. Yes, there are reasons that we may end up doing it. If you're getting advice from your financial professional, your accountant, your elder law attorney, then I'm going to trust that it's good advice, and that in that situation, if that's what you're being told to do, you should do it. But as a general rule, please stop reading the internet for estate planning advice. And I know that there's tons of people out there saying that that's the way to do it. And you have to be able to trust your children and grandchildren. This is not about trust, okay? Bad things happen to good people. So even if that child or grandchild doesn't kick you out of the house, even if they end up doing the right thing, they could end up in a divorce. They could end up in a car accident that kills a lot of people. They could end up in a long-term care situation. And those are things that are not the fault of the grandchild or the child or whoever it is that you're doing it with, right? It is not anyone's fault. Bad things happen to good people. So this is not about trust at all, right? Children, grandchildren, please listen to me. If your parent or grandparent comes to you and says that they do not want to put their house or their assets in your name, it is not because they don't trust you. Absolutely not. It is because things can happen to you that are outside of your control. Bad things happen to good people, right? So there's a better way to do it where we get all the advantages to the grantor or to the grandparent or parent, but also at the same time get the advantages that we need and want for the grandchild or the child, which is we want it to be included in the estate for the step up in basis to avoid the inheritance tax. We want the step up in basis to avoid the capital gains tax. We want the inheritance tax, but we also want the asset protection from the long-term care situation, which we can do through the trust, and therefore we're not completely reliant on the child or grandchild not getting in trouble in a divorce, in a car accident, going into a long-term care situation. So we can accomplish all of the things that we want in another way. But I do have to say, in my 20 years that I've been doing this, I have seen in several occasions where children and grandchildren kicked their parents and grandparents out of their house. Because who owns it, right? The child or grandchild owns it. And I truly believe that the people who did it were not bad people. They were desperate. And as I always say, desperate people do what? Desperate things. So I have seen situations where children and grandchildren were in the middle of a divorce, were shocked that somebody was leaving, that they were doing this, and that they needed access to money, so they kicked the parent or grandparent out. I've seen situations where people lost their jobs, and they had this asset in their name, they needed access to it, and so they kicked the parent or grandparent out. Honestly, I could go on for 10 minutes about situations where people did kick the parent or grandparent out of the house, but I'm not going to do that. For the sake of this show, I'm going to focus on that they won't do that. Although, please understand that they might, and it could be out of their control as to why they have to or why they think they have to. But for the benefit of the parent and grandparent, please, you have worked too hard. Keep the assets in your name. You control it. You decide what happens. Now, if you want to protect it from the long-term care situations, we have solutions for that. We have a trust that you can remain in control. You can change the terms of the document. You can change everything except you can't give it directly back to yourself. And we spend podcast after podcast and workshop after workshop talking about this specific trust. So please listen to those episodes. Come into the workshop. You will learn tons of information with no expectation of moving forward. So that hopefully answers the listeners' questions who have been asking about putting their grandchildren's names on the house, but they're worried about them squandering it. And as I indicated on this show, it can be squandered intentionally because they have bills, but it could also be squandered unintentionally because they have creditors such as car accidents, divorces, long-term care that may be outside of their control, and maybe something happens in their life, like they lose a job and they feel desperate and they feel like they have no choice. So we don't want to put anybody in that situation. There is a much better solution. There is a way to keep control as the grandparent or parent, but also get the long-term care protection that you're looking for, and also get the step up in basis for the children. So we can absolutely accomplish all of the objectives that you're looking for through the use of this trust. And we highly encourage you not to be putting your kids and grandchildren's names on assets, whether it be houses, because at the end of the day, yes, the assets probably will be squandered and will probably not be used in the way that you intended. And even if you can get the asset to the child or grandchild, as you will learn in our workshops, we always say to get those assets to them in a protected state. So when they receive it, it should also be protected for only them in a trust that they can control if you think they can handle it. We talk about that and much, much more in all of our weekly workshops that we have and other podcasts that we have done. So please check us out. So not only should the asset be protected during the life of the grantor to protect from their long-term care situation, but also after death for the children and grandchildren. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly. If you have anything you'd like to hear on the podcast, please reach out to the office. I will add it to my list and I will definitely cover it. If you're looking for education, please check us out in the York and Lancaster office, as we are offering free educational workshops on a very consistent basis and have access to those workshops via a link. Or you can also watch many of them live on Zoom when we have them in the rooms in York and Lancaster. You can watch from the comfort of your home. So whatever is best for you, please give the office a call at 717-845-5390. That's 717-845-5390. Or check us out at the web at www.bellomoassociates.com. We hope to see you in the Lancaster office at 1755 Oregon Pike, right behind Eden Resort and the Sheets. Thank you very much for spending your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and to the listeners who sent me those emails asking about putting the grandchildren's names on the houses, I really appreciate the question. Thank you for staying engaged. Thank you for having fun on this radio show. Until next time, we'll see you real soon. Have a great one, everyone.